A cowboy hired an Apache woman with a veil. When the veil fell, his world changed forever. Jacob had always lived a quiet life on the edge of the frontier. His ranch was small, but it had everything he needed: rolling fields, a few loyal horses, and cattle that he tended with care. The sun rose early, painting the horizon with shades of gold and amber, and every morning Jacob would step outside, take a deep breath of the fresh, crisp air, and feel a sense of satisfaction in the rhythm of his work. Life here was simple, but it was hard.
Days were long, and the work never ended, but Jacob found comfort in the routine. One particular spring morning, as the wind carried the smell of wildflowers across the dry fields, Jacob noticed that the herd seemed restless.
He had been trying to keep up with everything on his own, but lately it had become clear that he needed help. He couldn't do it all by himself anymore. Not if he wanted the ranch to thrive. He needed a hand, someone he could trust with the land and the animals. But in a small town like theirs, finding the right person was never easy.
Word spread quickly through the town about a new arrival. A woman had come to town, and unlike anyone else, she kept her face hidden behind a delicate veil.
The townspeople whispered rumors and stories. Some said she was mysterious, others claimed she had a tragic past, and a few even suggested she might be dangerous. Jacob paid little attention to gossip, but his curiosity was piqued.
A worker was a worker, and if this woman was skilled, that was all that mattered to him.
He went to the local inn where she was staying and asked to meet her. When she appeared, even from a distance, Jacob could sense a calm and quiet strength in her. She moved with ease and confidence, as though she belonged to the land itself. There was a certain grace in her presence, even though her face was hidden. She introduced herself as Nayeli, and her voice was soft but steady. There was no hesitation, no pretension, just honesty in the way she spoke. Jacob explained what he needed. The ranch required hard work: feeding the cattle, tending the fields, riding the horses, and keeping an eye on the land.
Nayeli listened carefully, nodding occasionally as though she already understood the demands of such a life. Then she simply agreed to help. She did not ask for much, only the chance to prove herself. Jacob was impressed. In a world where people often exaggerated their abilities or demanded more than they could handle, Nayeli's quiet confidence was refreshing. Over the next few days, she began her work.
From the very first morning, it became clear that Nayeli was more than capable. She moved among the cattle with a natural ease, guiding them without fear, without shouting, without the usual clumsy mistakes that sometimes happen when inexperienced hands tried to help. She rode the horses as if she had been born to do it, her movements smooth, precise, and controlled. Jacob watched her from a distance, a mixture of admiration and surprise filling him. It wasn't just her skill that impressed him. Nayeli seemed to understand the land itself. She could read the weather in the wind, notice subtle signs of illness among the cattle, and even predict how the river might rise after a rainstorm. Jacob had spent years learning these signs, and here was someone who seemed to sense them instinctively. It both intrigued him and humbled him. He realized quickly that hiring Nayeli was not just a matter of convenience. Her presence had the potential to change the way the ranch operated entirely. Despite the growing admiration, there was still a mystery about her. Nayeli never removed her veil.
No matter the time of day, no matter how comfortable the work, she kept it on. Jacob respected her choice.
He had seen enough of life to know that everyone carried their own reasons, and sometimes those reasons were personal and private. He didn't push her, but he couldn't help feeling curious. What was behind the veil? Why did she hide her face? There was a story there, he was certain, though he didn't yet know what it was. Life on the ranch began to settle into a new rhythm with Nayeli's help. She arrived at dawn and worked until the sun dipped below the horizon. Jacob found himself enjoying the quiet moments of watching her work. There was something peaceful about it, almost meditative. He had spent so much of his life alone, used to the predictable routines of ranch work, and now he had someone whose presence brought both calm and intrigue.
It was not companionship in the traditional sense. Not yet. But it was a connection he hadn't realized he was missing. The townspeople, of course, noticed her presence.
They whispered among themselves, wondering why Jacob had hired her, why she never removed the veil, and what kind of story she carried with her.
Some of them were skeptical, some were curious, and a few were even envious. But Jacob paid them little mind. He had long learned that small-town gossip rarely mattered when it came to real work and real people.
What mattered was the person in front of him, and Nayeli, in her quiet, deliberate way, was proving herself every single day. One morning, while they were moving the cattle across a steep ridge, Jacob watched Nayeli guide the animals with steady hands. A young calf slipped and nearly tumbled down the hill, but Nayeli reacted instantly, catching it before it could fall. She handed the calf safely back to Jacob, who couldn't help but laugh despite the tension of the moment.
"You make it look too easy,"
he said, shaking his head. Nayeli only smiled behind her veil, a small gesture that somehow conveyed both amusement and humility. It was a fleeting moment, but it stayed with Jacob for the rest of the day. As spring turned into summer, Jacob began to notice other things about her. Nayeli spoke little of herself, but she listened carefully, observing the patterns of life around her. She noticed when the fences needed repair, when the water troughs needed cleaning, and even small details like which plants thrived best in different parts of the fields. Her knowledge of the land seemed almost innate, as though she had grown up in the soil itself. Jacob respected skill, and in Nayeli, he found a rare kind of intelligence that went beyond mere experience. Evenings brought quiet conversations as they worked together on the ranch. Jacob would sometimes ask questions about her past, her family, her travels, but Nayeli remained polite, yet reserved. She spoke in gentle, measured words, revealing small pieces of her story at a time. Jacob didn't mind. In fact, he appreciated the patience she showed. Life had taught him that the most interesting stories were often the ones revealed slowly, and he felt that with Nayeli, he was at the beginning of discovering something remarkable. One night, after a long day under the sun, they sat together on the porch of the small ranch house. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, and the first stars began to appear. Jacob offered her some lemonade, and they talked quietly about the work, the weather, and the changing seasons.
Nayeli, in her calm way, shared small insights about the land, about survival, and about observing the world without judgment.
Jacob found himself listening intently, realizing that her perspective was different from anyone he had ever met. It was thoughtful, patient, and full of quiet wisdom. By the end of the first season working together, Jacob knew one thing for certain. Hiring Nayeli had been one of the best decisions he had ever made. She was reliable, skilled, and strong. But more than that, she carried a presence that changed the rhythm of the ranch. Life here was no longer just about routine. It had become richer, filled with new energy and new possibilities. The mystery of her veil remained, but Jacob sensed that one day the story behind it would reveal itself. Until then, he was content to work alongside her, learning from her and slowly discovering the depth of character and courage she brought into his life. Jacob had lived many years thinking he understood the ways of the world, the land, and the people in it. But with Nayeli, he realized there were still lessons to be learned, surprises to encounter, and stories to unfold. The arrival of the veiled Apache woman had changed the ordinary rhythm of his days into something far more extraordinary. Every sunrise now held promise, every task carried meaning, and every moment reminded him that life could still surprise even the most seasoned cowboy. And so, the ranch continued, bathed in sunlight, filled with the sounds of cattle and the wind, and forever changed by the quiet, mysterious presence of Nayeli, the woman who arrived with a veil and the strength of a story yet to be told. The days on the ranch began to settle into a rhythm, yet they were far from dull. With Nayeli working alongside him, Jacob noticed that each task took on a new dimension. Where once he had labored alone, often feeling the weight of solitude, now there was a steady presence, a calm and unspoken energy that seemed to smooth over the difficulties of frontier life. Even the cattle, which could be stubborn and unpredictable, responded differently when Nayeli was nearby. They seemed to sense her understanding of them, her gentle patience, and her quiet confidence. Jacob had expected someone capable, but he had not expected the depth of skill Nayeli possessed. She seemed to know instinctively when a horse was uneasy, when a calf was too tired to keep up with the herd, or when the soil needed tending before planting seeds. There was no hesitation in her movements, no wasted effort, just efficiency wrapped in grace.
Jacob found himself admiring her more each day. He had seen many workers come and go, but few had the combination of talent, strength, and quiet intelligence that she brought.
Despite their growing familiarity, Nayeli remained enigmatic. Her veil never came off, and she spoke only as much as necessary. She answered Jacob's questions with thoughtfulness, sometimes offering insights that seemed almost beyond her years, but she never revealed more than she wished. This mystery, rather than frustrating him, drew Jacob in. There was something compelling about a person who could hold themselves with such dignity and discretion. He respected her space, but he couldn't stop wondering about the stories hidden behind the fabric of the veil. The townspeople continued to gossip as townsfolk do. They speculated endlessly about Nayeli's past, about why she wore a veil, about where she had come from and why she chose to work on Jacob's ranch. Some whispered that she was running from something, while others said she was hiding her beauty or her identity. Jacob, however, paid little attention.
The opinions of idle people mattered little when faced with real work and real life. What mattered was her character, and her actions every day spoke louder than any rumor.
One afternoon, while tending the western field, Jacob noticed a disturbance among the cattle. A young calf had wandered too close to a ditch and was struggling to get out. Before Jacob could reach it, Nayeli was already there, steadying the calf with gentle hands. She whispered softly to it, guiding it out of danger without panic, without rushing, with a patience that Jacob could only admire. When the calf was safe, she handed it back to him and gave a faint nod, almost as if acknowledging that life's challenges were always easier when faced together. Jacob felt a pang of admiration and something else he couldn't yet name, a respect that was slowly turning into something deeper. As the summer heat grew stronger, the work became more demanding. The sun blazed down, the dust rose in clouds, and every task required endurance. Jacob noticed that Nayeli never complained. She accepted the work as part of life, moving through it with focus and determination. And yet she also seemed to have a way of noticing small joys in the routine. The way a horse's mane shone in the sunlight, the simple beauty of wildflowers growing at the edge of the field, the calm of the wind before a storm. These moments reminded Jacob to look beyond the hard work and see the life that existed in small, quiet details. One evening, after a long day in the fields, Jacob and Nayeli paused at the edge of the ranch to watch the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange, red, and purple, stretching endlessly across the horizon. Nayeli stood beside him, silent, but he could feel her awareness of the world around her. It was as if she appreciated the beauty of the land in a way that went beyond words. Jacob, who had grown up in this region and thought he knew every inch of it, realized that he had been missing something. Life was not only about survival, it was also about noticing the small wonders that made each day unique. Their quiet companionship grew with time. Jacob found himself sharing little details of his past with Nayeli. Stories of the ranch, memories of family he had lost, and the hardships he had endured. Nayeli listened attentively, never judging, only offering understanding when it was needed. And though she shared little about herself, the way she responded to Jacob's stories, her gestures, the tilt of her head, the soft nod, conveyed empathy and insight. Jacob began to trust her not only as a worker but as a person whose presence added meaning to his days. One morning news came that the river near the ranch had risen after heavy rains upstream. Flooding could threaten the land and the livestock if it reached the fields. Jacob knew he could not handle it alone. This was a moment that required courage and teamwork. Without hesitation, he and Nayeli worked together to secure the fences, move the cattle to higher ground, and prepare for the worst. The work was exhausting, the mud slippery, and the rain relentless, yet they persisted. Side by side, they faced the challenge with determination and skill. During the effort, Jacob began to notice the depth of Nayeli's resilience. She seemed fearless in the face of danger, her actions precise and calm even when the wind and rain battered them. She moved with a rhythm that made every task look easier, even though he knew how physically demanding it was. Jacob realized that her strength was not just physical. It was mental, emotional, and rooted in experience that he had yet to understand.
It was rare to encounter someone who could balance such quiet confidence with efficiency and care. As they worked through the day, Jacob observed how Nayeli treated not only the animals but the land itself. She seemed to know where to step, how to lift, and when to pause. Every action was deliberate, considerate, and mindful. Jacob had always thought he understood what it meant to work with nature, to respect it. But Nayeli's movements, her awareness, revealed another level entirely. She had a connection to the earth that went beyond mere survival, something instinctive, intuitive, and profound.
The storm passed by evening, leaving behind a transformed landscape. The river had risen, but the fields were largely intact and the livestock was safe. Jacob and Nayeli sat on the porch, dripping wet, exhausted, and covered in mud.
Yet there was a sense of accomplishment in their silence, a quiet pride in having faced the challenge together. Jacob stole a glance at Nayeli, noting the strength in her posture, the determination in her eyes even behind the veil, and the calm composure that seemed unshakable.
He realized that she was someone who could face anything life threw at her, someone whose presence brought not only skill but also reassurance. It was in that moment, as the wind dried their clothes and the first stars appeared, that Jacob's curiosity about the veil grew stronger. He had spent countless hours wondering who she was and why she chose to hide her face. Yet now, after witnessing her courage and resilience firsthand, he began to feel that her story might be even more remarkable than he imagined. The veil was no longer just a piece of fabric. It was a symbol of a mystery, a strength, and a life lived with dignity and care. The days turned into weeks, and Jacob noticed a subtle shift in their relationship. There was trust growing between them, a quiet understanding that did not require many words. He found himself looking forward to her observations, to her calm presence, and to the moments when she shared small pieces of wisdom about the land, the animals, and life itself. Nayeli, in her gentle way, had brought a sense of order and meaning to the ranch that Jacob had not realized he had been missing. Though their bond was unspoken, it was undeniable. Jacob began to feel something unfamiliar, an awareness that Nayeli's presence had changed the rhythm of his life. Work that once felt repetitive now carried meaning. Danger now felt manageable with her by his side, and even quiet evenings seemed richer and fuller. He began to sense that life on the ranch was no longer just his own story. It was now a shared journey, unfolding with patience, courage, and quiet discovery. As summer settled fully, Jacob realized that he had begun to see the world through Nayeli's eyes in some ways. He noticed the subtle changes in the wind, the soft patterns of animal behavior, and the beauty of the land itself. Her influence had quietly shifted his perspective, teaching him patience, awareness, and the value of silent observation. Jacob had always thought of himself as experienced, knowledgeable, and capable, but Nayeli had shown him that there was always more to learn. Always more depth to life, and always more ways to connect with the world around him. By the end of the season, Jacob felt a sense of gratitude he had not known before. He had hired a worker, but he had gained much more. A partner, a guide, and a presence that brought strength, calm, and insight to his life. Nayeli's quiet determination and steadfast presence had become indispensable. The ranch, once simply a place of work, had transformed into a space where life, labor, and trust intertwined. And through it all, the mystery of her veil remained, a quiet reminder that some of the most important stories in life reveal themselves slowly, in moments of shared effort, patience, and understanding. The summer had settled into long golden days, but the frontier was never truly calm. Life on the ranch required constant vigilance. One morning, Jacob noticed dark clouds gathering in the distance. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain, but something about the air felt heavier than a typical summer shower. He had seen storms before, but this one felt different, threatening, urgent, and relentless. He called Nayeli to his side, and she immediately understood the seriousness in his tone. Without a word, they began preparing the ranch for the coming storm. Nayeli moved with a quiet determination, her veil still hiding her face, but her movements full of purpose. She checked the fences, ensuring they were secure, inspected the water troughs to prevent flooding, and helped Jacob organize the cattle. Every action she took showed experience beyond mere skill. It was as if she had faced situations like this countless times before. Jacob marveled at her calm efficiency. Even in the face of potential danger, she radiated a quiet confidence that reassured him. The storm arrived with a sudden intensity. Rain fell in heavy sheets, drenching the land, and strong winds whipped the trees, threatening to tear branches from their roots. Jacob and Naeli worked tirelessly to keep the cattle safe. The animals panicked, bellowing in fear as the storm battered them. Jacob called out directions, trying to stay calm, but the wind and rain made it hard to hear. Naeli, however, seemed to have a natural command over the chaos. She moved among the animals with grace, soothing them with soft words, steady hands, and gentle guidance. At one point, a young calf slipped and fell near a muddy slope, dangerously close to a rushing stream. Jacob froze for a moment, fear gripping him. Before he could react, Naeli was there, lifting the calf with ease and steadying it against the storm's fury. She handed it back to Jacob without a word, and her action spoke louder than anything she could have said. Jacob felt a surge of admiration and gratitude. This was more than skill. This was courage, strength, and compassion in action. As they worked together through the chaos, Jacob began to notice something else. Naeli's awareness of her surroundings. She seemed to anticipate dangers before they happened, guiding the cattle and even warning Jacob of loose branches or slippery ground. Her instincts were sharp, and her decisions were precise. Jacob realized that she was not only protecting the livestock, but also teaching him a subtle lesson about observation, patience, and the importance of moving with care. The storm, harsh and unforgiving, became a classroom, and Naeli was the teacher he had never expected. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of slowing. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the landscape in brief electric moments. Jacob's heart raced each time it struck, but Naeli remained calm, her composure unwavering. In those moments, Jacob noticed something unusual, a faint glimpse of familiarity in her movements, as though he had seen such confidence before in a place he could not yet recall. The thought unsettled him, but he pushed it aside.
Right now, there was no time for reflection. The animals needed them, and the ranch needed them.
By late afternoon, the storm reached its peak. The river near the ranch began to swell dangerously, threatening the lower pastures. Jacob knew that if the water rose any higher, they could lose part of the herd. He and Naeli made quick decisions, guiding the cattle to higher ground and securing gates and fences. Mud clung to their boots, rain soaked their clothing, and every movement required effort, yet they persisted.
Jacob felt a growing sense of partnership with Naeli.
He had worked with many people before, but never had he experienced such seamless cooperation. They were moving as one, anticipating each other's actions without speaking, trusting instincts and skill alike. Then, in a moment that seemed almost unreal, a strong gust of wind swept across the field. A large branch broke off a tree, hurtling toward Naeli. Jacob shouted a warning, but before he could act, she dodged instinctively. The branch grazed her shoulder, causing her to stumble slightly. In the motion, her veil loosened. For the first time, Jacob saw her face. Not completely, but enough for the storm and mud to reveal her eyes and a fleeting glimpse of her features. Time seemed to freeze. Jacob's breath caught. Her eyes held the strength he had not fully noticed before, a combination of resilience, intelligence, and quiet fire. In that brief moment, he felt a strange mix of awe and curiosity. There was a story behind those eyes, a depth he could sense but not yet understand. The veil had hidden more than her appearance. It had concealed a history, a life of experiences, challenges, and survival. Seeing even a glimpse of her face shifted something inside Jacob, a realization that Naeli was far more than he had ever imagined. After the storm passed, they moved the last of the cattle to safety. The mud and rain had left the land scarred, but the animals were unharmed, and the ranch had survived. Jacob and Naeli collapsed onto the porch, soaked, exhausted, but alive. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and rain, and a rainbow arched across the sky, a symbol of calm after chaos. Jacob found himself staring at Naeli, the veil now slightly askew, her face partially visible. He wanted to ask her about it, to understand the story behind the eyes he had glimpsed, but he also hesitated. There was a moment of respect and silence, a recognition that some things revealed themselves in time and not all questions needed immediate answers. Over the following days, Jacob noticed a subtle change in their relationship. The storm had created a bond of trust and mutual reliance. He saw her not just as a worker, but as a partner, someone whose courage and intelligence had saved the ranch and the animals. And while he still knew little of her past, he sensed that she had endured hardships, experiences that had shaped her into the remarkable person she was. The veil remained, but Jacob's curiosity grew stronger, mingled with admiration, respect, and a sense of connection he could not yet define. Life on the ranch gradually returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of the storm lingered. Jacob found himself watching Naeli more closely, noticing the way she moved, the decisions she made, and the quiet confidence she carried. She was more than capable. She was extraordinary. He began to realize that her presence had shifted the balance of his life, bringing energy, insight, and a perspective he had never considered. The veil, while still a mystery, became less a barrier and more a symbol of the layers of life, experience, and strength she carried with her. One evening, as they repaired fences damaged by the storm, Jacob found himself reflecting on her resilience. He spoke aloud, almost to himself, about how few people could handle challenges with such grace and determination. Naeli paused, her hands resting on the fence, and said simply, "Experience teaches patience. The land shows you its ways if you are willing to watch and learn." Her voice, calm and measured, struck him deeply.
It was not just the words themselves, but the certainty behind them, the lived truth she carried.
Jacob realized that she had not only survived storms like this, but had learned from them, turning hardship into wisdom. As days turned into weeks, Jacob began to notice small gestures that revealed her thoughtfulness. She would move quietly through the fields, checking on the cattle before anyone else noticed a problem. She anticipated needs without being asked, repaired tools and fences proactively, and even took time to notice small details of beauty around the ranch, the way sunlight fell through trees, the patterns of clouds in the sky, and the subtle colors of wildflowers along the fence line. Her awareness was remarkable, and Jacob found that he was learning from her just by observing her attentiveness and care. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Jacob realized how much his life had changed. Before Naeli arrived, he had spent long days in solitude, focused solely on survival and maintaining the ranch. Now, with her presence, life had gained a new depth. Challenges were still there, but they were faced together. Work had become richer, more meaningful, and even small victories felt significant. And behind it all, the mystery of her veil remained, a quiet reminder that some stories reveal themselves only in time, through shared effort, trust, and experience.
Jacob began to notice something else, a sense of anticipation whenever he saw her.
Not in a romantic way, at least not yet, but a recognition that her presence brought energy, perspective, and even joy to his life. Her skills, wisdom, and quiet courage had become indispensable. He realized that the frontier, with all its challenges, had given him strength, but Naeli had brought something different: insight, patience, and a deeper understanding of the world and the people in it. She was teaching him lessons he had never expected, simply by living and working alongside him. Then came a day that changed everything. Jacob and Naeli were repairing a fence at the edge of the property when a strong wind whipped through the field. Naeli lost her balance, and this time the veil slipped completely from her face. Jacob froze, staring at her, and for the first time he saw her fully. Her face was striking. Not only beautiful in a quiet, natural way, but also defined by strength, intelligence, and resilience. There was a light in her eyes, a spark of determination and life experience that left Jacob momentarily speechless. In that moment, Jacob felt a profound shift. Everything he thought he knew about her, about life on the ranch, and even about himself seemed to expand. Naeli had been more than a worker. She had been a guide, a teacher, and a presence that had quietly reshaped his world. Seeing her face, he realized that her veil had hidden more than her features. It had concealed the story of a life lived with courage, resilience, and quiet dignity. The revelation filled him with awe, respect, and curiosity, and he knew that life as he had known it was about to change forever. The morning after the storm, the ranch was quiet. The fields glistened with dew, reflecting the soft light of dawn, and the air carried the earthy scent of wet soil. Jacob walked toward the barn, his mind still filled with the memory of Naeli's face revealed in the storm. He could not shake the image, the strength, the intelligence, and the quiet fire in her eyes. It had been only a fleeting glimpse, yet it lingered, leaving him with a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and a sense that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Nayeli worked quietly in the barn, tending to the animals with the same precision and care she always showed. She seemed unaware of Jacob's gaze, yet there was a tension in the air that neither could ignore. Jacob approached her cautiously, unsure if he should speak or simply wait for her to act. She turned to him and nodded, her eyes calm but intense. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the silence full of unspoken thoughts and questions. Then, slowly, Nayeli reached up and adjusted her veil. This time, however, she did not replace it fully. Instead, she let it rest loosely around her shoulders, revealing her face completely. Jacob felt his breath catch. Her features were striking, but it was more than beauty that held his attention. There was a story in her eyes, a history of challenges faced and survived, a quiet dignity earned through resilience. Nayeli's gaze met his, and for the first time, Jacob felt as though he was seeing the person she truly was. Not just the worker who had helped him with the ranch, but the woman who carried strength, courage, and wisdom within her. There was a depth to her presence that went far beyond physical appearance. Nayeli spoke, her voice calm but filled with emotion.
Jacob, she said, there is something you need to know. I have kept my veil not to hide from you, but to protect a part of my past that I have only recently learned I am ready to share.
She paused, gathering her thoughts. I am Apache. My people carry a long history of survival, of struggle, and of maintaining our traditions in a world that has often tried to erase them. I have faced hardships that shaped who I am, and I have learned to carry strength and dignity in silence. The veil was my way of holding that past close, of protecting it while I found a place where I could work, live, and trust again.
Jacob listened intently, his admiration deepening with every word. He had always thought he understood courage, having worked the land for many years, faced storms, and managed the dangers of frontier life.
But this was different. Nayeli's courage was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and deeply rooted in her history. It was a resilience that came from surviving loss, injustice, and displacement, and from carrying the knowledge and traditions of her people. Jacob realized that he had been in the presence of strength all along, strength that went far beyond what he had imagined. She continued, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. I have traveled far, searching for a place where I could belong without hiding who I am. Your ranch, your land, and your willingness to work together, these have given me a sense of purpose and trust. I chose to come here because I sensed that you would see me not just as a worker, but as a person capable of contribution, of understanding, of partnership. I did not expect that revealing my face would be easy, but I have learned that some truths cannot remain hidden forever.
Jacob felt a deep sense of respect for her. He thought about all the weeks they had worked together, all the shared moments of labor and quiet reflection, and all the challenges they had faced side by side. He realized that he had already come to trust her completely, and now he understood why. Nayeli was not just skilled and reliable. She was wise, perceptive, and deeply courageous. Her story, partially hidden behind a veil until now, explained everything about the strength and calm she had displayed. For a moment, Jacob struggled to find words. He had never encountered someone like Nayeli. Someone whose life experience was so vast, whose perspective was so profound, and whose courage had shaped her into a person capable of facing any challenge. He wanted to say more, to express his admiration, his respect, and his gratitude, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he nodded, letting her words sink in. He understood that this revelation was not just about her identity. It was about the depth of life experiences she had carried with her, quietly, with dignity and strength. Nayeli went on to tell him more about her journey.
The lessons she had learned from her family and community and the hardships she had endured after being displaced from her homeland.
She told of the ways her people had survived against great odds, maintaining their culture, values, and traditions, even in the face of relentless challenges. Jacob listened in silence, absorbing every word.
The story was not one of bitterness or anger. It was a story of resilience, hope, and unwavering determination. He felt honored to be trusted with it.
As she spoke, Jacob began to see the world in a new light. He had always known life was hard, and he had faced his own struggles. But Nayeli's experiences were of a different magnitude. She had learned to carry pain without letting it define her, to move forward with dignity, and to offer strength to others even when her own path had been difficult. Jacob realized that he had much to learn from her, not only about the land and the work, but about life, courage, and the power of endurance. The revelation also changed Jacob's perception of the veil. He had once seen it as a barrier, a mystery to be solved, but now he understood it as a symbol of protection, strength, and identity. It had been a way for Nayeli to navigate a world that could be harsh and unforgiving while maintaining control over her own story. Jacob felt a renewed sense of admiration, not just for her skills, but for the wisdom and courage embedded in every choice she had made. For the first time, Nayeli removed the veil completely. She let it fall to her side, revealing her face fully without concealment. Jacob studied her features, seeing not just beauty, but a reflection of a life lived with courage and dignity. Her eyes were bright and clear, filled with experiences that had shaped her into the person she was today. The sight of her unmasked face brought a profound sense of awe and respect, deepening the bond that had already begun to form between them. Jacob realized that his world had changed. Nayeli was no longer just a worker, a helper, or a mysterious presence on his ranch. She was a teacher, a guide, and a reminder that life was full of unseen depths, resilience, and strength. Her story had opened his eyes to perspectives he had never considered, to lessons he had yet to learn, and to the importance of trust, patience, and understanding. He felt a deep gratitude for her presence, recognizing that she had transformed the rhythm of his life in ways he could not have anticipated. Over the following days, the atmosphere on the ranch shifted subtly. Jacob and Nayeli worked together with renewed understanding, their bond strengthened by the trust and honesty they had shared. The tasks of the ranch continued, but now they were accompanied by a sense of partnership and mutual respect that went far beyond labor.
Jacob found himself observing her with new appreciation, noting not only her skill, but her patience, her wisdom, and the quiet strength that had carried her through so much. Jacob also began to reflect on his own life.
He had faced many challenges, but Nayeli's story reminded him of the larger world beyond the ranch, the struggles, traditions, and resilience of people whose lives were shaped by circumstances beyond their control. He realized that life could be richer and more meaningful when one recognized the strength in others, when one learned from the experiences of those around them, and when trust and respect formed the foundation of human connection.
Nayeli, for her part, seemed at ease now.
The veil that had once been a shield was gone, yet she carried herself with the same dignity and strength as before. Jacob noticed that she moved with a freedom that reflected her comfort, not just with him, but with the place, the land, and the life they were building together. Her openness was a gift, and Jacob felt honored to witness it, to learn from it, and to be a part of it. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky with warm colors, Jacob understood the depth of the change that had taken place. He had met someone extraordinary, someone whose life experience, courage, and wisdom had reshaped his understanding of strength, resilience, and partnership. Nayeli's presence had transformed the ranch from a place of routine labor into a space of learning, growth, and shared purpose. He realized with clarity that life would never be the same. The woman who had arrived in town with a veil had revealed more than her face. She had revealed the power of courage, the importance of trust, and the beauty of resilience. Jacob's world, once defined by routine and solitude, had expanded to include a deeper understanding of life, of people, and of the quiet, unspoken strength that lies within those who have endured and survived. In that moment, Jacob knew that the story of the veiled Apache woman was not just hers. It had become part of his story as well. And in the quiet of the evening, as the wind whispered through the fields and the stars began to appear, he felt a profound sense of gratitude, hope, and anticipation for the journey ahead. Life, he realized, was no longer just about survival or routine. It was about connection, understanding, and the transformative power of shared experience. The days after Nayeli fully revealed her identity felt different on the ranch. The sun rose as usual, casting long shadows over the fields, but there was a new lightness in Jacob's world. He moved through the morning routines with renewed energy, observing the land and the animals in ways he had never done before.
With Nayeli by his side, work became more than just a series of tasks. It became a shared effort, a rhythm of cooperation and understanding. Every moment seemed fuller, richer, and more meaningful.
Nayeli approached her work with the same quiet strength she had always carried. Yet there was now a subtle openness in her demeanor. She no longer needed to hide her face, and in turn, she seemed more comfortable sharing small stories, insights, and moments of humor with Jacob. He found himself listening intently, learning not only about the practical details of ranch life but also about patience, observation, and resilience. The land itself seemed to respond to their partnership, as if the fields and animals recognized the harmony between them. Jacob had spent years on this ranch thinking he knew the rhythm of life here, yet with Nayeli he discovered a new layer to everything. She pointed out patterns in the weather that he had overlooked, noticed details in the cattle's behavior that suggested health or distress, and anticipated problems before they became crises. He realized that she was not only a skilled worker but also a guide, teaching him to see the world more deeply, to pay attention and to act with care and intention. As summer slowly shifted into early autumn, the ranch began to thrive in ways Jacob had never imagined. The fields were greener, the cattle stronger, and the fences sturdier. Tasks that once felt tedious now carried satisfaction, not just because of the results, but because they were shared. Jacob found that work alone had its rewards, but work together had a different kind of meaning, one that included trust, mutual respect, and shared triumphs. Nayeli had become an indispensable presence, someone who transformed even ordinary moments into lessons in courage and awareness. Evenings became a time for reflection and connection. After long days in the sun and wind, Jacob and Nayeli would sit on the porch, watching the horizon as the sky changed colors with the setting sun. Sometimes they spoke of the land, sometimes of the animals, and sometimes of small glimpses of their pasts. These conversations, though calm and measured, deepened their understanding of each other. Jacob began to see her not only as a partner in work but as a companion in life, someone whose presence added warmth and insight to the routines he had once considered simple. One particular evening, after a day of tending to a newly fenced pasture, Jacob looked at Nayeli and realized how much she had changed the rhythm of his life. He had come to admire her skill, respect her courage, and now he felt a growing sense of connection that went beyond admiration. It was as though her presence had unlocked a part of him that he had not known existed, a capacity for empathy, patience, and trust that deepened each day. Nayeli, in her quiet way, had become a mirror, reflecting the best parts of Jacob back to him while also challenging him to grow. The bond between them became evident in their actions, not just in their words. When a sudden problem arose, such as a gate left open, a sick calf, or an approaching storm, they faced it together seamlessly. Jacob no longer felt the weight of responsibility alone. Nayeli shared it, lifting both the physical and emotional burdens of life on the ranch.
There was a silent understanding between them, a rhythm of cooperation that required no explanation.
Each movement, each decision, each small effort was part of a dance they had perfected over weeks of trust and shared experience. Jacob also noticed that the townspeople began to view Nayeli differently. What had once been whispers of curiosity and suspicion had shifted to respect and admiration. People saw her not only as a capable worker but as someone who carried herself with dignity, intelligence, and courage. Jacob realized that her presence had changed not only his world but also the way others interacted with the land and community around them. She had brought a quiet influence, a subtle force that reshaped perspectives and expectations without demanding attention or praise.
Nayeli's influence went beyond skill and presence. It affected the very culture of the ranch. Jacob found himself thinking differently about challenges, about decisions, and about what it meant to live in harmony with the land.
He had once been focused on survival and routine, but now he considered sustainability, care, and foresight. Her knowledge of nature, observation of patterns, and instinctive connection to the world around them taught him to approach life with patience and attention. He realized that life was richer when seen through multiple perspectives, and Nayeli had opened his eyes to a depth he had never experienced. As the months passed, Jacob and Nayeli grew closer. The connection between them was not sudden or dramatic, it was gradual, built on trust, shared experiences, and mutual respect. There were moments of laughter, quiet reflection, and even gentle teasing, each one reinforcing the bond that had formed between them. Jacob had always thought of companionship in simple terms, but with Nayeli, he began to understand that real connection was built on understanding, patience, and appreciation for the strength and wisdom in another person. Winter approached, bringing crisp air and shorter days, but the ranch was ready. The fences were strong, the cattle well fed, and the fields prepared for the seasonal shift. Jacob and Nayeli worked side by side, their partnership now seamless. They moved with efficiency, anticipating each other's needs and acting without unnecessary words. The storm of the previous summer had forged a bond that continued to deepen, and the lessons they had learned together made them stronger, not only as workers, but as individuals.
Jacob reflected on how much his life had changed since Nayeli arrived.
She had begun as a mysterious worker, her veil hiding her face and her story. Over time, she had revealed not only her skill, but her courage, wisdom, and resilience.
Her presence had reshaped his routines, challenged his assumptions, and opened his eyes to lessons he might never have learned alone.
And now, with the veil gone and trust fully established, Jacob understood that his world had been forever transformed by this extraordinary woman. There were quiet moments when he would watch her work in the fields, noting the ease with which she moved, the precision of her actions, and the calm focus that seemed to guide everything she did.
It was not just the skill that impressed him. It was the patience, the wisdom, and the grace that accompanied every movement. He realized that Nayeli had become more than a helper or a partner. She had become a teacher, showing him how to see the world with clarity, respect, and mindfulness.
The transformation was not only personal. The ranch itself reflected the partnership between them. Animals thrived, crops flourished, and the land seemed healthier, more vibrant, and more resilient. Jacob recognized that it was not just hard work that made the difference. It was the combination of skill, understanding, and attention that Nayeli brought. She had taught him that success was not simply about effort, but about harmony, observation, and the ability to adapt with care and awareness. As spring returned, bringing new growth and life to the ranch, Jacob and Nayeli continued their work with renewed purpose. They planned for the future together, discussing improvements to the land, better ways to care for the animals, and strategies for the seasons ahead. Their partnership was no longer defined by necessity alone. It was defined by choice, trust, and the shared joy of accomplishment. Jacob realized that he had come to value Nayeli not only for what she could do, but for who she was, and the impact she had made on his life was profound. One evening, after a long day of work, Jacob and Nayeli sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. The sky was ablaze with colors, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and earth. Jacob turned to Nayeli and spoke softly.
I don't think I realized how much I needed this, needed you. You've changed everything, not just here, but in my mind, in my life.
Nayeli smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the setting sun.
And you've given me a place to belong, a place to trust, and a life I thought I might never find, she replied.
They sat in companionable silence, the understanding between them unspoken but deeply felt. Jacob realized that the story of the veiled Apache woman had become his story as well. Her courage, wisdom, and resilience had reshaped his perspective, teaching him lessons he could not have learned alone. And in turn, his acceptance, trust, and respect had given her a space to thrive and share her strength freely. Together they had created something rare and beautiful, a life of partnership, trust, and mutual growth. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Jacob felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The ranch was more than a place of work. It was a place of learning, growth, and connection. Nayeli's presence had transformed not only the land and the work, but also his heart and mind. The veil that had once concealed her story was gone, revealing a life of courage, strength, and wisdom that had forever changed him. He understood that life's most profound lessons often come from unexpected places, and he was grateful beyond words that hers had come to him. In the months and years that followed, Jacob and Naomi continued to work the land, facing challenges together, celebrating successes, and deepening their bond. Their lives became intertwined, a tapestry of shared effort, trust, and respect. The ranch flourished, and their connection grew stronger, a living testament to the power of resilience, courage, and the transformative force of genuine partnership.
Jacob often reflected on the journey that had begun with the hiring of a mysterious veiled woman. What had seemed like a simple decision to bring help to the ranch had become the start of a life-changing story.
Naomi had taught him more than he could have imagined, about patience, about understanding, about resilience, and about the quiet strength that can transform lives when one is open to learning and growing together. As dawn broke each day, the ranch came alive with the sounds of animals, the rustling of wind through the trees, and the quiet footsteps of two people working together. Jacob and Naomi moved with confidence, skill, and trust, knowing that together they could face whatever challenges came their way. The story of the veiled Apache woman was no longer a mystery. It was a lesson, a journey, and a partnership that had forever changed the rhythm of life on the ranch. And so, life continued, not as it had been, but better, richer, fuller, and more connected. Jacob had discovered that true strength lies not just in facing the land and its challenges alone, but in the courage, wisdom, and companionship of someone who shares the journey. Naomi had shown him the power of resilience, the beauty of patience, and the transformative magic of trust and partnership. Together, they had built more than a ranch, they had built a life.